Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jennifer Geary, who has, over the last 25 years, served as a managing director, chief operating officer, and chief risk officer across a whole load of industries, from financial services to not-for-profit. But she has been writing a series of best-selling business books about that: how to be a chief operating officer, how to be a chief risk officer, how to be a chief people officer, how to be a chief sustainability officer, and the augmented chief operating officer. And she's a big Business Book Awards finalist. So that's quite a long introduction, but thanks for joining us today, Jennifer.
Thank you, Gareth. It's great to be here.
So last summer, we had your co-author, Anna Krotova, on talking about the Chief Sustainability Officer book. How has that been received?
It's been really well received, actually. It's selling very, very well. And, we were just talking about this, before the podcast. One of the things I'm noticing, it's got kind of healthy ongoing sales, but then every now and again, I'm seeing some bulk buys going on. So it looks as if people are maybe buying them for their department or, wanting to share it with people. And of course, that's really flattering. And one of the lovely things, and you probably get this as well, Gareth, about writing a book, is every now and again, someone will just reach out to you and say, like, thank you. Something you said really resonated with me, or you helped me make sense of something. So it's kind of an ongoing, very rewarding experience. But no, it's selling very well. And I suppose I did wonder, and we can get into this, given the current environment, whether sales might suffer, whether, sustainability might become less fashionable. But that is definitely not the case. And in fact, where are we now, sort of early February, it seems to be selling stronger than ever, maybe notwithstanding the external environment.
Yes. I'm finding the same across business. I'm finding suddenly an uptick in interest in sustainability. The last time I had something like that was at the start of COVID, where I thought people would go off the topic, but it seems to bring people back on. So it'd be very interesting to see if that sustains. So how did you get into writing this series of books?
So it all started, gosh, it's coming up on 8 years ago now. I had a good career and plenty of broad-based experience. I trained as a chartered accountant. I had worked in risk functions. I had some technology, program management delivery, and even a little bit of legal experience. And so you would say, gosh, that's a very kind of, good broad base. When I went into my first COO role, and even notwithstanding all of that experience, I couldn't get over the breadth of what was required from that role. And in preparing for the role, I had also, by the way, been chief of staff to a COO. So I had seen all the different areas that he covered and built up some knowledge there. But even still, when you step into that first role, there is so much that's expected of you. And you're expected to know a little about an awful lot. Mm-hmm. You've got to be conversant. You've probably got people reporting into you who are experts in areas from everything from insurance to buildings to corporate communications to people to finance, obviously depending on the structure of the role. And you've got to be able to be useful and credible to all of them. So in preparing for the role, I did what lots of people do. I assessed where I felt my strengths and weaknesses were and tried to research and shore up the areas where I didn't feel so strong. And there was nothing really out there. There was no handbook for the COO role. So I had to do it bit by bit. I had to kind of, identify all the different areas. I had to go deep into each of those, research, study, call up friends, network, ask people for advice, and kind of learnt it and built it up the hard way. And when that role finished 3 years later, I thought, I wonder if I can distill all of that, everything that I've learned, into a book. And I counted 16 disciplines that the COO needs to have. I wonder if I wrote a chapter on each of those, and I wrote some, signs of great performance or some signs of underperformance and how to take something from good to great, and 10 intelligent questions to ask at the outset. Is that a book? I've no idea. Anyway, I did. I did. And I also learned how to self-publish as well. So, unlike you, Gareth, I didn't really know how to go about getting a publisher or anything, or why a publisher would want to publish me. So I went the self-publishing route, which has been really good for me, actually. I get a lot of control in terms of what I do. So, sorry, that's probably a very long-winded answer,
No.
but in short, I felt the need for a book that wasn't there. I tried my hand at structuring it and putting something down about everything, and I kind of figured out the rest and got it live.
Yeah, that's actually quite similar to my experience, because certainly The Green Executive, my second book, was written because I was starting to be invited into boardrooms, which is relevant to what we're talking about today. And I was looking around for models and, ways of explaining sustainability at that top level, rather than the sort of middle management where a lot of sustainability was floating at the time. And so having to create those models, I thought I'd write a book about it. Oh, and my first book was originally self-published, but a publisher asked, could they take it on? So it can be. It wasn't that I understood. It was a lucky break, I think. Of those list of books, obviously the augmented COO stands out. What is an augmented COO?
So that it's a smaller book than the others, and it is a little different from the others. It was part thought experiment, part book, part me starting to look at and work in the world of AI. And what I wanted to do was revisit those 16 disciplines that I just talked about, and with the help of AI and research, look at the threats and the opportunities to each of those functions arising from AI. So, take, for example, the legal function. There are some incredible benefits from AI coming, everything from, discovery of evidence and trawling through, mountains of documents that would have taken interns months and years to do, to just, at the press of a button, to, where there are new threats coming from AI. And obviously you don't have to think very hard to think about, say, the legal threats or, around intellectual property or things like that. So to take each of those 16 disciplines in turn and look at the threats and opportunities, and obviously through that, look at the takeaways for the COO and how they can augment their role rather than be diminished or threatened or replaced by it. And I think, the conclusion that I came to was, for the COO, AI is going to curate and improve the amount of information that you have in front of you. Hopefully less higher quality information, but that decision making and that judgment that you look to good COOs for remains. So actually, I concluded that COOs should be augmented by AI and not diminished.
Right. It's an interesting issue going back to sustainability. And I've had AI people on before, because my worry about AI is that giving the machine do all the grunt work, does that take away from some of the understanding of the context of the data that you're actually being presented with? Because if you're just saying to a black box, give me the answer, and something pops out, I just worry that something gets lost along the way.
That's an interesting point, isn't it? Is some of the point of a sustainability exercise for an organization? Is it the journey? Is it the journey in actually understanding and gathering the information? And I hear that, but I also know, in working with Anna and talking to lots of sustainability officers, that when you first land in a CSO role, sometimes the first 2 years are about nothing but gathering data. And there's such a heavy data and reporting burden that sometimes that can take over everything else. Yeah. And that's not good either, right? As a CSO, you need to be out, you need to be, educating people, working with people, coming up with new ideas. And if all you're doing is stuck in a room crunching through data, you're maybe not optimizing the role. So again, and maybe I'm being over optimistic in all of this, Gareth, I see opportunity rather than threat in the main.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right in that. And I've heard quotes from 50% of the whole sustainability team, 50% of their time being spent on data gathering and data processing, up to 80%. So the question is, should you be working in the data mines, or whether you should be doing something? So that is, benefit of the AI, but I just always have a slight nervousness about it. So obviously, you've written the book with Anna on the relatively new role of a chief sustainability officer, whereas it tended to be a layer below that, sustainability director. I tend to find, rather than somebody who actually sat around the boardroom table. But have you picked up on either good sustainability performance from other C-suite officers, or places where they really should be taking on those issues and they see it as somebody else's job?
That's a really good question. I think where I definitely saw cross-fertilization, all of the C-suite books that I've written start with three fundamental pillars. And, maybe to some they're obvious, but I think actually sometimes, particularly for somebody in their first role, they can neglect them. So what I always start with is you have got to assess the culture of the organization that you're in or you're joining. You've got to look at the strategy of the organization, what it does, how it adds value, its competitive moat, its external environment, the changing factors, and you've got to be skilled in execution. So in taking whatever your framework is, in embedding it and making sure it really takes hold all throughout the organization. And those three pillars really lend themselves to the role of the CSO as well. Mm-hmm. Because if you have a culture that is positive, strong, beneficial, that is risk aware, is sustainability aware, is used to weighing up the positives and negatives of taking certain lines of action, that's going to help you. If you have a more closed off, siloed, sort of monoculture that only focuses on, say, financial performance and so on, that's going to be hard, right? That's going to be hard to execute within unless you can build some support for what you do. And obviously, there are no two sustainability strategies that are the same. If you don't ground your sustainability initiatives in the very essence of what the organization does, then it's not going to be successful. It's not going to resonate with the team. It's not going to take hold. And then finally, that skill of execution, which is, you've done all of the design, had all the meetings, got everyone, excited about what you're doing. How do you make sure in the day-to-day processes, execution, programs, that all of those plans are actually taking hold? So those three things apply to any C-suite officer and also to the sustainability officer.
Yeah. And there is that question of whether, I don't want to do down your and Anna's book, but whether a CSO role silos sustainability, or whether it would be better placed across the way. Because obviously, if the chief finance officer isn't fully bought in, you're not going to get capital spend, or the presumptions that sustainability is going to cost you more in the long term, can extend. And obviously, the chief risk officer needs to be thinking about climate risks, for example. So one of my internal debates is sort of always whether a CSO role should be standalone, or whether at that level it should be more cross-cutting across all those different roles in the boardroom.
And it also speaks to the size of your team as well, doesn't it? Whether you should have dedicated sustainability people in your organization, or whether actually your role is to leverage a coalition of the willing across all of the other functions. And we speak a bit to that in the book, all right, in terms of the different, the different pros and cons. And I suppose in a utopian world, we say, we wouldn't need a CSO because everybody would be sustainability minded and taking everything into account. But, the truth is, we're not there yet, and in fact, we're some distance from that. And I think without the galvanizing role of somebody whose job it is to look at sustainability, and yes, to seed those initiatives in the other departments of the organization. I think when everyone is busy, when nobody has time to just take on things on a voluntary basis, I think it would be difficult for sustainability to take hold. Now, maybe in time we may become more evolved organizations, and we may just naturally put this at the heart of what we do. But again, you only have to look at what's happening at the moment in terms of the deregulation agenda in areas like DEI and so on, to know that there needs to be pushback, I suppose, on that deregulation, and you need a strong person to hold up the values that the organization signed up to.
And presumably that person is the chief executive officer.
Well, ultimately, yes, right. But that CEO needs support, needs data, needs that framing, galvanizing force again. So that person who can bring together, look across, as I say, all the functions of the organization, what it does well, what it's all about, and saying, okay, what is that expression of sustainability that resonates with this organization?
And then I suppose going back to what we started talking about is, current political upheavals around the world, when we've got business owners, I suppose, I'm not sure if they are managing directors, CEOs, sort of bending the knee and changing their principles because of the result of one election. It begs the question, is that CEO role, should they be standing up for all these principles of sustainability, or whether they should be, trying to navigate tricky situations and maybe play it down for a while until the dust settles? I don't know if you've got any views on that.
Yeah, I think it is really tough to be a principled leader at the moment. And certainly in some of the larger organizations, you can see people not wanting to be the tall poppy, right? Not wanting to be the one that's going to get sort of cut down. And I think it's incredibly difficult to be, for example, leading a DEI initiative at the moment, or leading sustainability initiatives at the moment. And my heart goes out to, to your listener group, to that community, to people who are really feeling, threatened, I think, at the moment for what it is that they do. But what I think we can do in this changed environment, I think we have to be very clever in what we do. And I think we have to look at the other benefits of what we do from a sustainability standpoint. So, for example, where there are more efficient sources of energy, where getting your energy via solar or wind or wave power is actually cheaper or more efficient, that's something that we can play up. Where using less packaging is cheaper and lighter and easier. Where optimizing your supply chains and having shorter routes is going to make more sense for a time. I think we have to play up the many commercial benefits that there are to all of the improvements that we've been making all along. And it may well be that for certain stakeholders and to certain audiences, we have to play up those elements and those improvements over time, rather than maybe the sustainability piece. So if we can create that win-win, and I know it's not always possible, and that's where we're going to have the challenges, right? But so much of what we've done in terms of modernizing our ways of working come with multitudinous benefits, including sustainability and commerciality.
Yeah. I call that Green Jujitsu, which is adjusting your message for each audience and hitting the buttons that they need, rather than corporations still often have this sort of watered down activist, slightly hand-wringy approach to communicating sustainability, rather than sort of really attaching it to the culture that's already in the organization and what the company does. So,
yes.
Yeah.
You know what? I love your phrase, green jujitsu. But what it means is looking at what the organization does best, and as you say, aligning it. And by the way, that also works for things like chief risk officers as well.
Yeah.
So rather than having sustainability or risk management as this kind of, I call it like eating your vegetables, the way like you've eaten all the good stuff on your plate and then you have to eat the vegetables because, and rather than it feeling like that sort of an activity, an afterthought that you put at the last 5 minutes of a committee meeting. No, taking it out of that, centralizing it in your most strategic, most commercial discussions and putting it right in the middle of what the business strategy is. And I think that's absolutely right. Rather than having that, we really should do this because it's the right thing to do and we're good people. No, like what are the commercial benefits to doing this? How are we going to, beat the competition? How are we going to attract customers, talent to our organization in, through these methods? That's where the magic lies.
Yeah. One of my clients culturally is very all about managing risk. That's the number one on their priority list. So the sustainability director made sure that climate change was in the risk register, because he said that's where it will always get noticed. It'll be reviewed time and time again. anywhere else, and it might get neglected. So that's
Yeah.
sort of taking that Green Jujitsu approach a little bit further. So absolutely.
Yeah, and not just, I mean, for some, companies like insurance, for example, climate risk is absolutely front and center, but there's also the risk of falling behind competition who are doing things in a better, more sustainable way, who are marketing better than you, who are attracting better talent than you. So, sustainability and, the environmental, social and governance aspects of risk management are plentiful, and you need to bring those in as well. But yeah, the risk management lens, I say that sustainability is the most fundamental risk of all, right at the bottom.
Yeah. Which takes us on, I suppose, to the fundamental risk from a business point of view is your business becomes redundant.
Absolutely.
In a low carbon agenda. I always talk about Blockbuster on every high street, certainly across the UK, America, probably across the world. Netflix comes along with a rental scheme on by post, and then pivot to streaming. Blockbuster is just left and behind and disappears. And that risk in sustainability terms, I think, is not quite appreciated yet. I recently spoke to a business who's doing wonderful things they generate more clean energy than their energy consumption, so they export it. They have zero waste, all these things, but their product is part of the fossil fuel value chain. So if we make this switch over the next 10, 15 years, their market's going to diminish or disappear. So that, I suppose, the ultimate leadership question is how do you react to those, rather than it being a sort of CSR type approach to managing these things? How do you address the strategic direction of the business in a low carbon economy?
And that's sort of the other meaning of the word sustainability, isn't it? Sustainable, ongoing, long-term success, right? That comes from creating a product or a service that people want in a way that is sustainable, in a way that remains relevant, popular, and doesn't get supplanted by, some new upstart that does things better or cleaner or greener than you. And, that sustainability of success, I think, is the ultimate reason to do all of this. If you're not innovating as an organization, if you're not staying close to your customer base, if you're not serving changing needs, then yes, extinction is what awaits you down the line. So sustainability as a byword for ongoing innovation and improvement and meeting the needs of your customers and the world is what it's all about.
Yeah. And that ability, I think, to create a burning platform is probably the biggest risk of all. And we can particularly see the motor industry at the minute, which is another one I cite all the time. So I do apologize for repeating myself, but the two biggest electric vehicle manufacturers in the world, which Tesla and BYD, have never, and by some distance, have never built an internal combustion engine car. And all the other people who have spent decades, if not a century, developing and evolving the internal combustion engine car, they have to make a decision sometime whether to stick or twist. That's going to be fundamental. So the discussions in the C-suite there, going back to our topic, I suppose, must be quite fraught at times, I would have thought.
Yeah, that's one. It's just so interesting to look at the ebb and flow of interest in electric vehicles at the moment, and where it's going to go. And I don't profess to be an expert in that space, but again, to your previous point, that is the opposite of, oh, let's have a nice chat about sustainability. This is like, who are we? What do we do best? What does our customer base need? Where is it going to go in future? And even bigger thing, do we need, how much private transport are we going to need versus versus alternatives. I was down in the south of France at the weekend, and I used to remember going between Nice and Monaco. It was about 2.5 hours of driving the Corniches and stuff, and now it's 25 minutes and €20 return on a beautiful, clean, modern train. So things change the whole time, and you've that sort of blue sky thinking. You've got to look back and see what way it's going to go and lean into that change.
Yeah, yeah. Both, as I say, the construction and the destruction of that part of the business. But there are many businesses have done it. If you dig into the background of IKEA or Nokia, they started off manufacturing completely different things to what they're famous for now. But yes.
I love Paul Pullman in his book Net Positive talks about rediscovering the organization's soul.
Yeah.
What it's ultimately about at its very core, what it's about and what it does well, and going back to that and revisiting that and then innovating via that.
Yeah. I'm looking through the list I have here of types of C-suite officers to pull out anything else. I mentioned the chief finance officer before. I think that is a key role when it comes to sustainability, because we've got to understand those financial implications, and obviously the chief technology officer and the chief risk officer that we've already talked about. But there is that financial link all the time, obviously, and in my experience, CFOs tend to wield an awful lot of power in the boardroom, perhaps more than others, and quite often become CEOs in my experience as well. So CFO wasn't one of the ones on your list of books. Is that something you're considering?
No, that's right. I have I've flirted with the possibility of doing that. I have to, because I have only held two C-suite roles in my time. Those are COO and Chief Risk Officer. Yeah. And I won't write a book about a role that I haven't done. So I'm reliant on a co-author. Although I did qualify as a chartered accountant, I obviously know my way around a set of financial statements, but I have not held the role of CFO. And so it's a matter of finding the right co-author, because I always want to make sure that everything I put out there is grounded in real life experience. So that may be one in the future that I look at. So CFO and sustainability do share a really important relationship. So it's not just as you said about things like budgets, but if you look at the financial statements, the auditing of the financial statements, the attestations that you make, and now this branching into sustainability reporting and the ISSB and the other standards around that, CFOs know instinctively what it is to gather data, to report in a compliant way, and to have that attested to and audited in very precise ways. I often think if I was to go back and do it again, I probably would be doing a joint ACA and sustainability reporting, qualification. I think that's where that line of work is going. Yeah. So the CFO is a really important influencer and ally around the C-suite table. But I would say every single senior executive on the ExCo, whether you're a large company or a small company, can and must be an ally to the sustainability space. So however you're structured. So I can draw a line between any function and sustainability. So for example, if you think about the chief people officer, if you want to attract the best talent, having a strong sustainability message and agenda is a huge attractor. I was going to say particularly for the younger cohorts in the workforce, but no, for everybody, to be honest. Having that strong mission, vision, values, value set, and sustainability message is a huge attractor and retainer of people. It's also a marketing tool, not solely a marketing tool, right? Not just greenwashing, but actually when you really authentically live those values, that is a really strong, attractive tool. It can be a source of new products. It can be a source of innovation, new services, new ways of doing things. It can be a revenue generator. And obviously then from the kind of legal and compliance standpoint, it's got really important overlaps as well when you look at all the regulation that we have to adhere to. So, and again, given the challenge that sustainability and DEI and other initiatives are facing right now, there's never been a more important time to be a really strong ally and to draw clear parallels between sustainability and what the organization does.
Yeah. One of the most interesting mechanisms I've heard for doing that, and I heard it from somebody very close to a CEO of a utilities company that I won't name, that they insisted that everybody else around the boardroom took on a sustainability project. They could decide what it was.
Yep.
But they had to deliver a sustainability project within their part of the organization, within their function, and report back. Yeah. And I found that interesting, both in terms of a way of, getting that cross-cutting commitment that you've been talking about, but also getting maybe a little bit of competition between people around the table, because nobody would want to come up with something lame if the CFO is doing something fantastic, and you're sitting there as a chief technology officer going, well, we put a solar panel on the roof. It's competition works at that level.
I guess I do like that, and I like the idea of ownership. That ownership sitting strongly with the other lines. I think if Anna were here on the call, she would say it is, however, important to look at your materiality and look at your impacts. And it may be that the top 3 projects are in your supply chain or product space or something like that, and sort of putting a solar panel above the, is nice, but frankly, not where the organization maybe needs to be focusing, its efforts and so on. So I can see pluses and minuses of that approach, but I do like the idea of that ownership, yes, and it residing elsewhere.
Absolutely. And I've seen competition do great things. I've seen people who are doing something mediocre then be thrown into an environment where other people were doing, their peers were doing equivalent things, and suddenly their ambition shot through the roof because they wanted to compete.
Love it.
Okay. The thing I missed out from my introduction is you're a fellow podcaster.
Indeed.
Yeah. So tell us about your podcast.
So over in particular the last 8 years when I've been writing, but sort of all through my career as well, you meet some terrific people, some people who really make you think and think in a different way, and who bring some of their brilliance and sort of you're the richer for speaking to them. And I had actually probably kind of for about the last 18 months, 2 years, I had developed a list of just really cool, smart people that I wanted to interview at some point. So I've taken the 5 books and kind of as a collective term, I'm now calling those the C-suite framework, which obviously allows me to build to that as it goes along as well, and created the C-suite framework podcast. And it's an interview format, so like this one. And it doesn't necessarily, sometimes it directly speaks to something like, for example, strategy. So I had Dr. Max McKeown, the writer of the strategy book, to come on and talk about strategy. So sometimes it's a very clear, particular area. Obviously, I've had Anna Krotova on as well. We talked all things sustainability. But then sometimes it's just somebody really interesting. So I had a supply chain expert come on and just talk about all the aspects of managing your supply chain. Or my latest one, how to raise equity. And the next one will be how to raise debt. So there isn't a pattern to them necessarily, other than just something really interesting that you'll come away with and just know a little bit more about something at the end of it. So they're about a sort of 45-minute chat. I like to think, I do a 5K walk around my park, and it's got to pass the headphones in the ears, walk around the park test. We've got kind of 7 or 8 of them up already, and I'm adding to them the whole time. So yeah, the C-Suite Framework podcast, and I love it. I absolutely love doing it.
Yes. Available on all podcast platforms?
Wherever you get them, the usual Apple, Spotify, so on. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, your reason for starting the podcast is the same reason I start this, is to speak to interesting people such as yourself and learn from them. And I think we've had a great discussion today talking about all those sorts of leadership issues when it comes to sustainability. So thank you for joining me today, Jennifer.
Thank you, Gareth, and thank you for all you do and your great books as well. And shout out to your community. Keep going, keep flying the flag. But great to speak to you today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Take care.